Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Danny Show. I'm your host, Daniel Cody, giving you commentary and reviews on all things wrestling. And as always, thank you guys for your views, especially with my thoughts on Punk and Eddie Kingston. That reached up to almost 200 views. So thank you. That's a record, and I appreciate that. Never done before. But today, I got a couple of things I want to discuss. But for right now, let's discuss last night's AEW Full Gear with our first match opening being MJF. I can't stand that guy from a scripted standpoint versus Darby Allin. In the opening segment, MJF comes out and then Darby Allin comes out with a video, which I thought was something that reminded me of Mick Foley's opening with the car crash and everything, when actuality it was a recall of a painful memory that took place in Darby Allin's childhood where he lost his uncle. So my thoughts and prayers to him. And it said that it made him half dead, which is why he has the half painting of himself in the skull, kind of like what you would see in the character of Two-Face. Not that we're calling Darby Allin Two-Face, but the match opens up with amateur skills on display, with fans appreciating the athleticism on both sides. I was surprised to hear 25% of the crowd chanting MJF, whereas most of the crowd was chanting for Darby Allin because nobody likes MJF. We just can't stand the guy. But either way, MJF went for a running dive, while Darby went for a dive, while MJF taunted the crowd. You love it, furball. That's him, of course. And of course, MJF took control after a coffin drop rather, failed attempt. So MJF took control. We thought he was going to go for a tombstone, even though he would eventually. I'm going to tell The Undertaker on you. But of course, we saw a stunner from the top rope from Darby Allin. Later on in the match, we would see a knee to Darby's spine, and I think it was Darby Allin that was like, oh shoot. But of course, that wasn't enough to keep him down. The Pinnacle comes out to fight to defend MJF, but Sting fights them both off. But we did manage to see Darby Allin do a coffin drop onto the floor, but that doesn't keep Kenny down. Of course, Kenny came back, and both of those guys traded roll-ups, kind of like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Macho Man did at WrestleMania 3. Except what we saw tonight was much better. It was like nothing I ever seen before. But of course, MJF, being the guy that he is, would cheat his way to victory using that little ring. So MJ wins, and I still can't stand the man. Nobody can stand the man, which is what you're supposed to do. The guy's doing a really good job of making himself the most hated man alive because I just don't like the guy from a scripted standpoint. Next, we have the Lucha Brothers versus FTR, whom I know and some of you may remember as the Revival before coming to AEW. So both guys fought at the same time, and Phoenix maintained, I hope I said his name correctly, Phoenix made great balance, walking the top rope without falling and leaping to avoid attack, but he managed to keep his balance on, which is something not even The Undertaker could do when he did Old School. Of course, what else happened? FTR was able to counter both dives from the top rope by the Lucha Brothers. However, we were able to see a cannonball senton onto both members of the FTR and a double thrust kick to both parties. Uno, dos, tres. That was awesome. So moving on, Peta was isolated by members of the FTR, but Phoenix was finally tagged in. And when Phoenix tagged in, he was able to get a double cutter, or maybe I should call it a double stunner, for a 2 count. Of course, we saw later one of the members of FTR and the Revival mock Eddie Guerrero with an attempted Three Amigos, but Peta reversed it and did it properly. And of course, Phoenix went for the frog splash only to have a kick out. But thankfully, later on, they went for this move called, if I may say correctly, um, spiked Wheeler for the win. And even though, of course, FTR being dirty tried to use the belts, it didn't work out. But bottom line, spiked Wheeler for the 1, 2, 3, and the Lucha Brothers thankfully retained the AEW Tag Team Championships. Now let's get down to something very familiar. Bryan Danielson versus Miro, which in WWE would have been known as Daniel Bryan versus Rusev. So Miro has this angle in AEW where he is known as God's favorite son, which in my scripted humor, and this is just my scripted humor, where I'm from, we're taught that God doesn't like a narcissist attitude. And Miro plays the role of a God kind of person, yet is a bit of a narcissist. And why they always got to bring God into something and make people narcissists? They did it with Devon Dudley. Devon Dudley was the old testify, and all of you are filthy sinners. And remember Mordecai? It's interesting, but I don't have time to get into that. All I know is Bryan Danielson offered a handshake. May I ask why WWE did not allow Bryan Danielson to have the American Dragon nickname? I don't get it. Why not? But either way, the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, offered a handshake. Miro did not accept. So, filling out process starts. We see yes to kicks, chops to woos. Yes for kicks, woos for chops. And of course, Miro takes control of the match for a little bit, but then Daniel Bryan, or should I say Bryan Danielson, I apologize, I'm used to calling him Daniel Bryan. Bryan Danielson goes for a vintage Bryan, running knee from the top rope, yes kicks in the ring as we're used to calling them, and then turns it into a knee bar. I gotta tell you, Bryan has holds like Dean Malenko, Kurt Angle, etc. All the great technical wrestlers, Bryan Danielson is in that category and is one of the best at it. So, after the running knee is countered into a power bomb, Rusev crush because he went for the camel clutch, but he's not Rusev anymore. I know he's Miro, God's most narcissist son. Did you guys see that fan that said God fears Miro? Now that's the funniest thing. I know God, if God is in heaven right now, I know he when he saw that sign, he is drinking water and he's like just bust out laughing. But back to the match. It was a great match in my personal opinion. We saw Bryan escape the camel clutch and go for the yes lock, but turn it into a triangle choke, which was what put Eddie Kingston out. But Miro gouged his eyes out, and he ironically used the same move that would force him to leave WWE, the guillotine lock, if I looked closely and correctly. But nonetheless, Bryan wins and is now the number one contender for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. Next, we have the Super Click, Adam Cole, Bebe, and the Young Bucks, who for whatever reason had pink mustaches tonight. What in the free world? So we see, first off, we see Luchasaurus, who is about 6'8", do a dive. Let me see. He does a dive, a moonsault dive rather. Adam Cole introduces a chair. Jungle Boy makes a move and then poses while sitting down, and Adam Cole comes in and attacks. We see some more moves which involve um, Adam a bunch of super kicks rather. Everyone's super kicking each other. That's one thing that went down. And Jungle Boy hurricanranas Adam Cole through a table while one of the Young Bucks elbows Luchasaurus through another table. Christian goes flying off of one of the balconies in the crowd, taking out some of the Young Bucks and others. Then, moving forward, I saw something very disturbing as the Young Bucks and Adam Cole stuffed Jungle Boy's mouth with thumbtacks. Okay, guys, listen. Do not try that stuff at home. That thumbtack cereal. It's very disturbing. So we see that. We see Luchasaurus choke slamming one of the Young Bucks off the stage and Christian spearing someone. But one of the highlights would come at the end when Jungle Boy finally goes for a concerto on one of the guys. Speaking of thumbtacks, it was disturbing. Let me tell you something. The Young Bucks might be arrogant pretty boys, but they can be very brutal. I mean, last time we talked, the Young Bucks were putting thumbtacks on their shoes fighting the Lucha Brothers. Now they're using triple knees to Luchasaurus. But that didn't keep him down. He went for a shooting star press dive, which was awesome. But thankfully, at the end, Jungle Boy does a concerto onto one of the Bucks for the win. So that was awesome. That street fight was awesome. Speaking of teams, one team that is not on the same page is Cody and Pac versus Andrade and Malachi Black. Now, the irony of Andrade and Malachi Black was both men have one thing in common. One is married to WWE Queen Zelina Vega. The other was once managed by Zelina Vega. Most of you know who I'm talking about. Malachi is real life husband of Zelina, Queen of WWE. So those two came together and nobody seemed to get along. Pac and the Mustard, as I will call him to keep it PG, Pac the Mustard is having issues with Cody. And I'm going to just say this. I really think Cody needs to turn heel. I know that he doesn't want to and things like that, but sometimes you got to just go with the flow. It worked with The Rock in 97 as well as 2003. It worked for Bret Hart in 97 before it did The Rock. So sometimes you just got to go with the flow. I really think Cody needs to make a turn because the fans are turning on him, and now it's time for him to make the turn and get a little heelish. Now, they appreciated Arn Anderson, who knocked out Andrade's manager, but nonetheless, they don't like Cody. They liked Pac more, and they were happy to see Pac get somewhat of a victory when he tagged in and got the 450 splash, while Cody had, I believe it was Andrade. Yes, Cody had Andrade in a figure four leg lock. But eventually, Pac, who we used to know as Adrian Neville, went for what is called the Black Arrow dive from the top rope and got his team the victory. And for some reason, FTR attacks. Moving forward, we have another match with the women's division with Ty Conti, I hope I said that correctly, Ty versus Britt Baker. Say it with me. DMD. You got to say it with me, folks. That's something we got to say together. It's just that fun. But either way, the match had no one-sided. It was very competitive. from both sides. And I gotta say, to be funny, the buildup of this match was part of the thing they talked about was um, Britt Baker being insecure about the fact that Ty has a bottom and things like that. Who cares about the size of somebody's bottom? This is wrestling, people. But either way, it was a very great match, and don't let her pretty looks fool you. The Brazilian has a lot of mixed martial arts, karate like skills, and this match was great. What was hilarious to me was when one of Britt Baker's followers handed over the glove and was more enthusiastic than a fan. Here's the glove! Get her! Yeah! Get her! Get her! Yeah! Somebody had way too much sugar today. But either way, it was a great match, but it was a match that via roll up, Dr. Britt Baker, say it with me, DMD, won the match. So she's not just a master doctor in dentistry, but a great women's champion. Who can stop DMD? What does that stand for, guys? Y'all got to tell me what that stands for. I know about some of the wrestlers, but I never really found out what DMD stands for. But it just feels good to say it with everyone. But this match right here was a match I was really looking forward to. CM Punk versus Eddie Kingston. I don't have enough words to talk about this one right here. All I can say is it was very great to watch. It started off very intense with Eddie backhanding CM Punk, who made a beeline to the ring. And later on, CM Punk would be busted open. And of course, we had the fact that later on, Eddie Kingston mocked CM Punk and threatened to try and steal his move, but CM Punk used it and had to use it twice, by the way. It took 2 GTS to put Eddie Kingston down. And after CM Punk got a hard fought victory in what JR called a god darn fist fight, CM Punk extended his hand out of respect, but Eddie Kingston just wasn't buying it for some reason. But nonetheless, CM Punk won the match, and that was very fun because the crowd was really into it. In fact, some were chanting CM Punk, some was chanting for Eddie, and then the rest came in and said both these guys, which is something I'm used to hearing in NXT. But this next match right here was very entertaining because it was a match that saw the Inner Circle get their victory in a very hard fought Minneapolis street fight. We saw some great highlights, especially from Sammy Guevara, who would later be challenged by the returning, debuting on AEW Jay Lethal. I remember Jay Lethal from TNA days in his emulation for Randy Savage. But let's get back to the match at hand. It was great. We saw highlights from Sammy doing swan times in the ring and doing a swan time off a ladder to a table, which was awesome to see, kind of like Jeff Hardy. And we saw Chris Jericho finally get his hands on Lambert. Also, we saw Jack Hager use a butt cake pan. Why do they call it a butt cake pan? I don't get that. But regardless, it was a great fight, and Chris Jericho paid homage to Eddie Guerrero with a frog splash, and the Inner Circle would get their victory tonight. And everyone would continue singing Judas in my mind. I become man. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who like watching wrestling commentators, I noticed that a familiar face in the audience as the Inner Circle was making their entrance. I noticed there is a YouTuber, her name is Demon Diva. I noticed she was in the crowd that night. If you paid close attention, I know her face. For those of you who follow her, you probably noticed, but I did. So that's just another interesting fact I want to point out. And of course, the match was great. What I did not realize until later on was that the Lucha Brothers paid tribute to Eddie and Chris Jericho paid tribute to Eddie with the frog splash and all. Because, of course, today is the unfortunate anniversary in which Eddie Guerrero passed away in Minneapolis. So, very bittersweet night. Almost as bittersweet as the Royal Rumble from 2020. Very bittersweet. Most of you know why Royal Rumble 2020 was very bittersweet that Sunday. But this night was bittersweet because I realized that was the night Eddie passed away many years ago. So thoughts and prayers to the family because no matter how many years ago it was, I'm sure they still feel that. I'm talking Shaw Guerrero and Vicky. Thoughts and prayers to them because this is the anniversary of his passing. So, last but not least, let's get into the main event of the evening. Let's get into our main event of Kenny No Bees Omega, accompanied by Don Callis, POS, piece of something I can't say, versus Hangman Adam Page, and it's time for some cowboy stuff. And yes, I'm saying stuff because I don't swear on my channel. But I do like to have fun, and this match was great. It, I don't know what to say. This match was so awesome. It saw the best of both men. Kenny took control for a little bit, and let's just say Don Callis, POS, tried to assist Kenny and should be fined for wearing those ridiculous shoes, as JR said. But Kenny Omega came in, took some control. Of course, Adam Page, I don't want him to be confused with Adam Cole, but Adam Page took control and he fought back as well. Highlights of the match include Kenny Omega doing a Hurricanrana and, of course, a Terminator dive. Kenny Omega did that. Hangman Adam Page doing a moonsault off the top rope, if I'm not mistaken. And Kenny does a Tiger Driver for a 2 count, epic 2 count, and an avalanche buster from Hangman Adam Page that didn't keep Kenny Omega down. The fans once again chanted, "This is awesome." And now, for some reason, Hangman is bleeding a little bit, but the match continues and Kenny throws the referee into the woods to get knocked out. But before that, we saw Hangman Adam Page also do a flying elbow onto Kenny Omega, putting him through the table. That was very fun to see. We saw a dead eye for a 2 count. And of course, I love how Tony put it 2.999 seconds. That was awesome. They also traded suplexes, both Adam and Kenny. Page stole Kenny Omega's one-wigged angel, but that only got a 2 count, and the Young Bucks came in, and just when we thought the Young Bucks were going to help because they came out looking a little bit sheepish, they gave the thumbs up for Adam Page to go for his finisher, and finally, Adam Page is AEW champion, and the celebration continues. Young Bucks give a nod, and the Dark Order comes in to celebrate with them. So what a night. Awesome night. Awesome, 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 awesome. Can't say enough. And guys, thanks again for your views on my thoughts of Eddie versus CM Punk in that promo. That got more views than what I did about that SmackDown that week last Friday. So thank you guys so much for that. What do you think about tonight's event of AEW? Because for now, that's all the time I have, and I'll be back later on with the On This Day review of Survivor Series 2004. Until then, hope you enjoyed the show. This is the Danny Show. Be sure to check out my favorite views on Chris Jericho matches. Until then, see you later. Have a great Sunday.